All right. So here we are. I have Craig Lewis, the CEO of Gig Wage. Craig, I'm excited to dive in with you today. Maybe let's just kick it off with something basic. What's Gig Wage, and why did you start the company? Why are you running the company?
Yeah. GigWage is a venture-backed payments technology company. We help companies pay independent contractors, freelancers, 1099 workers, etc. I'm a longtime payroll technology guy. I used to work at ADP. Had various reasons of wanting to get into entrepreneurship and technology and venture capital specifically. So GigWage was kind of the culmination of all of those things.
That's awesome. And you've been working on it for 7 years. Is that right?
Well, I started the company 7 years ago. We pivoted to this brand and kind of go to market strategy in 2017.
Huh.
So we spent the first couple of years had a little bit of a different idea.
Was it a big change, or what was the early concept?
Yes and no. Like if I say it, it doesn't sound like a big change, but it was a pretty big change. We were trying to do free payroll for small businesses. So like maybe companies like Gusto, people may know, or
Yeah.
ADP. But we were just trying to do it for free, kind of like with a Credit Karma model, where like the payroll data would be the thing that we leveraged. Payroll data is a big deal these days, but 2014, 2015, it hadn't come around yet. So I guess we were a little early.
Huh. And was it just adoption was the challenge, or technically building it out?
Building it out was hard. We couldn't really ship the product because you got to build a complex, white glove, robust payroll system. But then you got to make it free, so it's kind of got to be like built to aggregate data and
Yeah.
ads and all this other stuff. And so it was just a really complex system. And I always joke I hadn't raised enough money to build that at the time.
Yeah, well, that's probably sounds like the truth. And how do you get into payroll? Like, how do you,
Yeah.
did you seek this out, or first job out of
No,
school,
no,
or?
no, no. Yeah. I've had these evolutions over life. I used to be the sales guy, and then I took a sales job at ADP,
Yeah.
and they were a services company at the time, and I ended up selling their first cloud based product, and I was kind of hooked. I was like, man, technology is going to be big. I like paying people. I like the business of it all, and so I found my way to payroll and technology through sales.
And then you did that as a consultant for a few years independently, prior to prior to.
Um, so prior to that, no. So I played basketball professionally in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I played in Germany, I played in Portugal, and then I started a company, a sports marketing company that failed miserably, and I didn't want anything to do with sports or entrepreneurship, so I got a job and away from sports, and ADP was where I landed. And then, I had sales experience
Yeah.
throughout college and prior to that too. And so I actually had written a book called The Sport of Sales. And I think okay, no, that was after the fact. I wrote that book later. Never mind.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, I was a sales guy for quite a while before I became the payroll guy, before I became the tech guy, before I became the entrepreneur guy.
Mm. It's funny how life twists like that. Like your
Yeah.
job in ADP, probably 10 years ago or something. It turns
Plus,
out, it
yeah,
turns out to be what you're working on today, and turns out to
for
be,
sure.
just the little decisions we make early on in life. Just they weave the direction we go, and it seems so
Yeah.
random at the time, right? But it's
Yeah.
like,
I always say, you never know which detail is going to make the
yeah,
difference. Right? But you just kind of wake up every day and keep putting one foot in front of the other. Looking back, it all makes sense, but at the time, I was just moving.
yeah, I respect that. What do you think shifting gears here? What do you, if you could just wave a magic wand and change the way that this country, the U.S., structures the tax forms in particular that we use, the W-2 and 1099, but just more generally, the way that we look at and kind of structure workers. We put them in these buckets of W-2 or
Yeah.
1099, or under the
Yeah.
table cash. What do you think? How should it be if you just waved a magic wand and restarted it from scratch?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it shouldn't be a magic wand. We actually literally should start from scratch. The way people work and live has just completely changed. It's just not
Yeah.
the same anymore. Something about America, we like to have left or right, two options. Like we just believe two options are kind of what matter. So I think
You're
there's
right. Yeah.
and you can look at that on a lot of different ways, I'm sure. Excuse me. But I I think with technology and a new generation entering the workforce and dominating the workforce, millennials and Gen Z, you have to really start to reimagine what's the point of work and why are people working and what are they trying to get out of work.
Mm.
And the thing you've been doing for the last 100 years probably isn't it.
Mhm.
Mobile phones weren't around. You couldn't push a button and get work. You couldn't push a button and make money. That changes things. You couldn't live in America, travel abroad, and still be earning money. And so that money is, available when you come back. And so you just got to really start to reimagine it. And so, the thing about W-2s or traditional employees, it is a little bit more real time, right? Because taxes are pulled out in real time and all of that in the US specifically. The thing about 1099s, not only is it antiquated, not only is it not up to date with the way people work and the future of work, but it's really only reported on like 1 to 4 times a year. So the data's slow, it's outdated. People,
Yeah.
by the time you file your 1099 form, you're probably doing a completely different thing. And so it needs to be more real time, more modern. And so there's a lot of changes to it, man. And I think we need to look at how people want to work today and really redesign legislation around that. And the last thing I'll say about this is in the world of work, legislation typically drives the big changes. 1099 work, freelancers, contractors, gig workers is one of the first times that there's been this major macro shift in work that wasn't driven by legislation. Legislation is like trying to catch up.
Mm.
This is all technology and behavior. Younger generations want to work when they want to work, how they want to work, where they want to work, right? And they can do that because of the supercomputer in the palm of your hand. And so legislation is trying to catch up for the first time in the history of work itself.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a really interesting kind of paradigm that we sit in.
Yeah, yeah, because people can do 5 different jobs, and they're not even the word job is kind of antiquated in itself. It's like
Yeah,
if I,
task,
yeah,
job,
exactly, right.
make money.
Yeah, it's like if I write as a freelance writer online, I drive Uber for a few hours, maybe I
Yep,
babysit, or who knows? There's
whatever.
YouTube channels. There's so many different revenue streams. I kind of think of it as like removing removing as much friction that the government imparts on these forums as possible would allow people the freedom to move around and experiment. I mean, I love your Twitter background or your profile. Entrepreneurship, the gig economy is a pathway to entrepreneurship. I think of
Yep.
it. So for me, man, I'll tell you this what you're working on hits home for me because one of my previous companies, we'd raised 23 million in venture as
Yep.
a platform for home caregivers to find
Mm-hmm.
work, called Home Hero. And we had roughly 500 caregivers on the platform. We were facilitating payments automatically using the Stripe backend, which was pretty
Yep.
new at the time, all 1099s. And it was pretty seamless. 1099 form would
Yep.
shoot out to them at the end of the year. They filed their taxes. It was great. And then California rolled out a bill that said all caregivers had to be W-2 employees. And I
Mm-hmm.
flew out to DC 3 times to meet with the Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez, and his team, and tried to argue that people are going to fire their caregivers because the
Yep.
prices for these people are going to increase 30 to 40%.
30%.
And sure enough, it happened. And what I did realize at that time, I realized that the motivation to do this, to change from 1099 to W-2, was about control that the government has over people working, and in particular, their ability to report jobs. Like tell me if this is different than how you understand it, but I understand when the government reports job changes, we created 300,000 jobs last month. They're reporting the W-2 filings. They're not
Mm-hmm.
reporting 1099. So when you work for
Yep.
Uber or something, you're not being recorded as a new job.
Yep.
Technically, you're unemployed or you're not categorized. And so it's like kind of it's an accounting. They're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole for accounting purposes to show jobs. Because how much of
Yep.
politics is about jobs? It's like jobs, jobs, jobs. And if you 1099, you can't show that. So I
And
just
that's
so
my point.
frustrating.
Like it's antiquated. It's
Yeah.
super antiquated. I'd probably throw one more caveat on there. More so, probably more important than just reporting, is taxes. It's actual money.
Mhm.
And so the thing about 1099s is you really only pay those taxes either quarterly if you're amazing, but probably just once a year. And so what the government really wants is to, you know, work with ADP so that money comes out every 2 weeks, every week. You know what I mean? And then able to understand what, and Uncle Sam can understand what that tax revenue actually is going to look like each year. And so yeah, I think reporting, antiquated, kind of greed is definitely something that's always been a part of the government as well. But yeah, like all of that being said, what are we really trying to track? Like productivity, output.
Mm.
You can gig work, 1099 work does all of that. Like those 500 workers you had, they were working. They were being productive. They were providing. You guys were providing services. If the problem is reporting that or collecting that data, let's fix that problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Yeah.
don't force people to work in a way that they don't want to work just to solve. What are we solving for, right? And so the big difference now, though, this shift, market demand is here. Like you're not going to be able to fight it, and we're seeing it with AB5 and Prop 22. Back to California again, the market, they want to work when they want to work, how they want to work, where they want to work, and that's what's going to happen.
And right, just catch me up on the most recent. I'm fairly familiar with AB5, but
Yep.
do you look at the general trend as being the government has put on a strong, heavy hand for regulation, and that people, to counteract that, they've either stopped working or they just go under the table, just Venmo me or pay me in cash, and so it's a
Yeah, that's
failure.
happening. Well, and back last November in 2021, I mean, Prop 22 was a bill that was a counter proposal to AB5, and it won, and allowed people to keep their freedoms and flexibilities, but also added like some benefits to gig workers too, because they're like, there's a lot of challenges with the gig economy because it is difficult to navigate. And how do you figure it out? You don't want to get hit with misclassification. You don't want to provide too much, but you want the cost savings. So there's some stuff to fix. So Prop 22 is a step in the right direction to say, hey, let people keep their freedom, let them keep their flexibility, but let's add some benefits to this as well, because that's what they need. Which I could also argue that benefits should be decoupled from work anyway. That's an antiquated concept in itself.
Amen.
Um,
I 1000% agree. Especially healthcare insurance
yeah,
should be
like
decoupled from
what?
work.
Yeah, like what does it have to do with anything? But it was a perk for employment when it rolled out,
In
and
the 1940s, which
and it
is,
was a
yeah.
legislative, but it was a legislative change, right? And it was the unions kind of drove it, whatever. So okay, so then back to your point about just kind of updating on where it's at. So recently, a judge overruled this Prop 22 vote that the market voted on, and everybody's like, well, Uber and Lyft and DoorDash, they spent like $200 million on this campaign. Okay, so what? Like people voted, you know what I mean? Like that's what it is. They voted for what they wanted, right? Or what they believe they wanted. And so a judge recently, I believe it hadn't made it to the Supreme Court yet, but a judge overruled and said that Prop 22 was unconstitutional, but that ain't gonna last.
Why?
And
What's
so
the logical viewpoint that
I,
he?
listen, it's so asinine that I didn't even spend a bunch of time on it. I'm like one, the market isn't gonna, it
Tolerate.
won't hold. It won't hold. And then two, I was just like, I mean, but the argument's always the same, right? Like these workers need protection, workers' rights. It's just really old, antiquated thing. Like if you ask, like just straight up ask somebody, like, would you rather have freedom, flexibility to push a button, turn on work, earn money whenever you want, or take the alternative and have access to benefits? They'd say, I want freedom and flexibility, and I'll go figure out benefits.
Right.
People will tell you that. Like people, you could even say like, would you want more money? Like they'd be like, nope, I'll take less money. Like the world is changing, right?
Yeah.
And legislation just isn't up. So the market won't hold. That won't hold in the market at all. And so I don't spend a bunch of time on it.
So we're just from a high level, the AB 15 and 22. What's the tension? It's saying that the
It's mostly around workers' rights benefit. A lot of it is around health benefits, PTO, sick leave, all the
mm,
things that are bundled into your traditional W-2 job.
mm,
The state of California is saying those workers should have those rights. They should be paid more. They should be paid a minimum wage. It's the same union argument that's always kind of
mhm.
existed, which is fine. but it just needs to be designed in a way that meets the new modern worker, not one that meets the old W-2 worker. Right. So
Yeah.
the tension there is, how do you keep one's freedom and flexibility to work with, choose when they want to work, versus making sure they are protected and have access to the things that our duopoly of a system only allows to happen one or two ways.
Yeah. Yeah. On the gig and benefits thought, it's like, well, if you didn't offer benefits to a gig worker, say they're on, TaskRabbit, they're working, say, six
Yep.
different gig jobs, no individual company or customer of theirs is going to offer them benefits. It's kind of silly to even think about that. But if everyone said, okay, let's decouple benefits from my gig job, then
Yep.
the salaries for the gig workers has to go up, because people are saying, hey, I'm going to take 2 weeks off, so therefore I'm willing to only accept jobs at higher rates. Like I think the thing that's so beautiful and worth highlighting in my mind is that the prices that companies can charge is only as high and as low as all of their costs bundled together are. The price for you buy a tennis racket on Amazon and it's $16. Well, it's perfectly calibrated at 16 because that's what it costs all the manufacturers, the shipping company, the paint company,
Yep.
the guy who put it in a box and delivers it to your doorstep is willing to work for.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And then, once you've built out these models at scale, if you change it, you threaten the actual business model, right? If you increase the cost of the labor by 30 or 40%, now you threaten all the jobs, right? Right. So if Uber can't sustain paying those drivers now, and then this is the question, this is the great question I ask people. Okay. People that choose to do any kind of work, whether it's low to middle income work or even high earners that have a choice, a 1099 worker, there's only a couple buckets you can fall in to do that kind of work. Some people do it by choice because they just like doing extra work, making extra money. Some people do it out of necessity because they have to do it. Some people, do it to make ends meet. There's just, there's only a couple reasons why you would do it. But regardless of what the reason is, no matter how positive or negative, the work is there for you to do. And clearly, I can't go apply for a W-2 job and on board. I can't work multiple I mean, some people are starting to actually, I think, work from home. People are working 2 or 3 jobs, full-time jobs, which is an interesting trend. But the gig economy will meet you where you are. It's there for you, regardless. Again, even if it's not the job you want. Say you want a full-time W-2 job, but there's some reason you're unemployed. It's right there for you. It may not be the best thing. And so I feel like people miss that. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe there are millions of people in the gig economy that don't want to be. But it ain't like they got some other place to be. Like this thing is helping them. You know what I mean? Like that's just this really interesting thing that I feel like nobody's really saying. And I'm like, there's 75 million people earning money.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know?
it's like, man, if you're thirsty and you need a gallon of water to fully hydrate, well, even a cup is going to do a lot.
Thank you
It's
for
like,
that cup. I wish I had a gallon, but I appreciate this cup.
Yeah.
And even if I don't appreciate the cup, I'm still drinking the water.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And unless you got a gallon for me, shut up.
Yeah, man. I think it has to come from. Tell me if you disagree with this, but the way that the work had traditionally been structured was large companies would produce things in manufacturing plants. People would clock in, clock out, and then there is that tension between the worker and the company, because the company is super powerful, because you don't have many options. You can go to this, especially in companies in cities like Detroit, where the means of production are pretty centralized on one vertical, like car manufacturers and things.
Yep.
And so people, if they need to get together and kind of fight for their rights, their benefits, but that doesn't really, it's not the same.
It doesn't fit anymore. And this is, mobile technology. I always talk about it. We're kind of entering in this like fourth industrial revolution, but like putting a phone in somebody's hand, a computer in somebody's hand changes all of that. Like it just flat out, it's just like if you go back far enough, you had like neighborhoods, clusters of neighborhoods. And then when like cars and trucks and buses got invented, you could like leave and go really far outside of that neighborhood. But before that, you had to do like everything in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
But once you got a car, right,
Yeah.
You could go 30 minutes somewhere and get busy, and that opened it up. Well, now again, anywhere in the world, I can push a button and make money. We see transcribers, people just sitting there typing, making money. Just all kind of stuff, voiceover work. I mean, there's just an infinite amount of ways to push a button and make money. And so, of course, those old stupid rules that are built on some geolocation and a specific industry with some dumb rule that got passed by some dumb guy that has some dumb belief 75 years ago. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
of
Totally.
course, that stuff is not going to work. But I don't think it's so far off, and technology has leapfrogged legislation so fast, especially in the gig economy. You can't iterate this thing. You've got to really start with a clean slate.
Is that what's the pathway to get to a clean slate?
Jeez, I don't know.
I know
I
that's the
mean,
question, right?
for us, I think it's data.
Yeah.
And so one of the things about gig wages, to your point about 1099 reporting being so slow and not as frequent, in the government wanting to report on stuff, I think making data more readily available about the amount of work, productivity, and earnings and impact that this shift has had will start to open up this kind of, again, data set into actionable items, right? And so when you look around, that data is kind of hoarded into a couple of large companies that have enough, like an Uber,
Mm-hmm.
like an Airbnb type company. But there are no ADP jobs reports right now that exist for the gig economy. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So there needs to be some form of transparency and data into the impact of what's happening. And I think legislation can pay attention to that.
Yeah. Agreed. What do you think about minimum wage? Do you think that is also, do you bundle that in kind of the old methodology for controlling work and that is antiquated, or do you think it has a place or somewhere in
I think it
between?
has a place, man. I think, with inflation and,
Yeah.
like cost of living in certain places, I think like if somebody's going to do some work, you should, as an entrepreneur, you should build a business that can support someone's life. If you're asking them to work for your, full time, whatever, even part time,
Mm-hmm.
really, like if you're asking um, for somebody to come in and do some work for you to make some money and serve a market, they should be able to make a meaningful, livable wage, right? I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's always necessary to enforce, but I think any company that steps up and decides to pay people well usually has the ambition and the right mindset to do well, right? And so I think there's another side to look at that. Like if people that are scared to pay $15 an hour or whatever it may be, they may need to really take a look at their business, you know what I mean? And like say, well, what would it take for us to be able to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm an ambitious guy, I'm audacious, and I go for it, right? And so we pay people really well at my company. Like I don't think we won't win every battle for wages, but I want as infrequently as possible money to be the reason somebody left.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's the most kind of like basic thing. You just pay people, right? Like so. Yeah, I think there's a place for minimum wage for sure.
Yeah.
And I think companies the ones that don't agree with it could start to look at it a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Well, you probably ask a lot of the people that work for you.
A ton.
You're ambitious, you probably have emphasize a culture of ambition and so I think of it like once you're kind of getting into high skill work, minimum wage is irrelevant. I
Yeah,
think of
different
it as
conversation.
like it's the it's the people who either they're really young and they don't have skills to really offer the marketplace, so they're willing to take something because what they're getting
Yep.
in return for their work is not just the
Sure.
money, but they're getting relationship skills, something thrown on the resume.
Well, it's to your point you made earlier. I'll say, that $16 Amazon product that you use as an example. There's a calibration, right, of value of work that you can do, just like pricing a product. So, um, I do think the other thing is pricing a product is extremely hard. Like it's probably one of the hardest parts of businesses is pricing. But I think, paying someone a fair value is a little bit easier to figure out.
Yeah. 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 I go so much back and forth on it because I can see both sides where
Sure.
if it's in, it kind of depends on the environment where it especially made sense when you have people, like you said, who didn't have the ability to leave their town or have access to
Yep.
other work employment opportunities. And so the power of if there's one company in town, you have no other options. It really comes down to options. If you can say, hey, you're only offering me $12 an hour, I want 16. Well,
Yep.
can I just leave and get another job that's paying me higher? If the answer to that is yes, minimum wage is kind of irrelevant, because there's
Yep.
such liquidity in the market. It makes sense when there's not a lot of liquidity. People can't just leave and go to their next thing,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I think, it comes down to benefits. Detaching benefits from the companies would make it so people can say, hey, you don't want to pay me enough? Great. I'm just going to leave and go somewhere else, start on Monday. But if it's like,
Yep.
oh, my healthcare is tied to this, my vision, dental,
Yep.
all these other things, it's like, it's
It's a headache.
tough. It's a headache, man. Yeah. 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 It really is. How do you view does crypto and blockchain affect this? Have you seen companies come out and maybe innovate in ways on that?
Yeah, I think fintech, and then we straddle like fintech and HR tech.
Yeah.
And so we're not doing anything just yet in the crypto blockchain space, although it's totally on our radar, and we're definitely seeing innovations around it. Obviously, moving money is kind of the biggest use case for crypto, or storing money right now, or value. But from a blockchain perspective, like we're seeing some interesting stuff, especially on the HR tech side, where like smart contracts are really coming into play.
Mhm.
And we think that could be a good use case for us too, with like contractor agreements and um, you know, real time payments, holding things in escrow for contractors when they do the work, especially as you get into more high skilled freelance work. And it's like people are doing a lot of work for a lot of money, and then you get people say, "Oh, I don't like that work. That wasn't a good job." And you're like, "Well, hell, I put a lot
Mhm.
into that." You know what I mean? And so holding money in escrow, smart contracts. We see some interesting use cases. We're not doing anything just yet,
Mhm.
but I think it's a fantastic technology, and excited, for the future for us to get more involved.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you stand? I'm curious on the argument that comes around with technology displacing jobs, and that it seems
Yeah.
to be bubbling up again. I looked into it. It's not a new argument. It had been around for well over 100 years, but
Yep.
you just label different technologies, like whether it's a printing press or the cotton gin
Hmm.
or the driverless car or in the internet itself. People
Yeah.
have this fear, and I wonder if there's like, is there some bigger story going on where humans are scared of technology? Like we're deep down inside, we're like, I don't know about this
Yeah,
technology thing.
Hollywood is scaring us, right? Yeah, I'm definitely contrarian from that philosophy. I believe technology creates more jobs, it creates newer jobs, and it creates better jobs. I think technology will continue to displace jobs that people don't want to do, jobs that we're arguing about minimum wage
Yeah,
over. I think it'll actually, at some point, as technology continues to accelerate, not only will it displace jobs that people don't want to do while creating new job opportunities. I think we're starting to see it create new economies.
yeah,
Like, and so, I'm sure you're hearing a lot about universal basic income, et cetera. Well, if we get productivity to a certain point to where that liquidity remains in the market at a constant, there's a real argument to be made that like people can get, so I think technology is really going to drive us to a closer to a like a utopian state than destroy all the
yeah,
jobs, right? I don't think either one of them actually, we won't become utopian, and we won't be, it'll be something in the middle. But I definitely am inclined to believe that technology is a good thing for all mankind.
yeah. I like the way you put that. I think of it sometimes as it's simultaneously utopian and dystopian. Like
Yeah,
we're living in
I can
both
dig
at the
that.
same time. You and
Yeah,
I
I
can
can
have
dig
this
that.
this conversation. It's like, by all means, you could call a ride, you could call the food,
For
everything you could
sure.
do is instant, and yet it's like, well, we have our fair share of like terrible
But
things
that's
going on.
but that ain't the tech. That's the people. It's just us.
Yeah,
Like we're good people and we're bad people. We make mistakes and we have successes, and so we're still building the technology, and we're still using the technology. So all the good that comes from it is really still us.
yeah,
Now, when we get to this is the thing that I think people get scared of. It's like when technology starts building technology, that's when it gets really interesting, right? Because a human built the tech, but then the tech is to the point to where the tech creates the new tech or writes the new code, and these are things. And so I think that's where it really gets interesting, and people kind of get freaked out. My wife and I this weekend watched a movie called I Am Mother.
Oh no, I haven't.
Yeah, check it out. And it's this, this central intelligence being, and it's an interesting concept. It was good. It was really good,
And
actually.
the idea is
But
that the AI creates creates the software that.
yeah, or starts to make those decisions about us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it gets interesting. So we're a long way away from
Yeah, I think it'll be, in reality, it'll be something more like a baton pass, where we're
that.
saying, it's like any logical person would say, AI beats people in chess. AI beats
Yeah,
people in Jeopardy. So it knows trivia. It can interpret all of human language. It can decipher anything. By all means, we should just let it make our political decisions, right? We can't agree on stuff. Well, let's give it to the supercomputer. Well, why not just
yeah,
give a super? I always thought, here's a funny thought example. You know how your grandparents, they probably come to you and they're like, Craig, I can't believe you do this. Back in my day, it was so
yeah,
different. They have their way of life in contrast to ours.
yeah,
And I think, okay, when I'm 70 years old, what's my grandkids going to be saying to me that I just can't? I'm like, I just can't get with this. And I think
yeah,
it's gonna be like, hey, Craig, my 16-year-old granddaughter comes home. She's like, I want to marry my AI. Like I've been in a relationship with it. He
yeah,
knows me really well. I have a body for him. He's right here.
yeah,
And I'm like, no, I think you should be with a human. I really think
yeah,
you should.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, but like, not racist, robotist,
Robotics, right? Yeah, yeah. That'll be.
uh, so yeah, I mean, but one of the things I will say about me is I'm committed and intentional about under empathizing and understanding things that I may not agree with. And so, like, if like I'm even looking at it now, right? I'm 39, and I'm starting to see, Gen Z people, they're doing they're doing things I'm just not a part of. I think it's cool. I'm not gonna do it, but I'm like, I'm not gonna be the guy that's like, oh, I don't understand why
Yeah.
y'all do things this way. Like, the world of work is a really wonderful example. We've got great age diversity at Gig Wage. I think our youngest employee maybe 22, 23, and we get up to about 57, 58, 60, somewhere in there, right? And you can just see it. People work different, they think
Mhm.
different, there's different norms. People get agitated by those differences. And I'm sitting there looking at it like, nah, that's cool. Like, that's how they did it in their day, or that's how they doing it now. Like, you got to be I think people have got to be more accepting. It is what you can't change it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? Now, that don't mean you have to do it, right? I'm like, like my some of our marketing team now, they trying to get me to do some TikTok dances or something, and I'm like, listen, I can dig it. I love those dances, those trends. I love all of it. I ain't doing it,
yeah, yeah,
but I'm gonna watch it and consume it and appreciate it. You feel me?
yeah,
So it's for me, I just, like I say, I just try to be empathetic and understand that. Listen, man, the tide is gonna change.
yeah, yeah. It does. And the old school folks who are working with you, the older people,
Yep.
they're kind of the anchor to how the world is. I think the trapping of the younger generation is to detach from the tradition
Exactly.
of just everything, and
It goes both
yeah.
ways. Yeah.
And if you don't have any grounding, like, think about your own life. If you don't have a routine, you wake up, you eat the same food and breakfast. If you don't have that, if one day you woke up and you're like, I don't remember who I am, I don't remember what my routine is, what I do for life, and what my relationships are,
Yeah.
you're in chaos. And so I think the older
Yep.
generation, the connection there, and where I think one of the trappings is if we don't have a connection between what used to be yesterday and then what tomorrow
Yep.
looks like, then we're kind of in this detangled random mess of like, where do we go? And then you throw in VR technology and people are building, imaginary land,
Metaverse.
the metaverse. It's like, wow, it's kind of crazy, because it
Yeah.
really it totally restructures how people think about the world.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing I'll say probably on that is I try to be inspired by the past, the present, and the future. Like,
Hmm.
I'm looking to be inspired by it all, man. There's context clues to success and to happiness and to peace, everywhere you look, but you got to be looking for it.
Yeah.
It's some good stuff from, like you say, old school people got some heat. I love getting that knowledge. People my age around in my world, cool, great, boom, and then looking forward, like, I got kids all under the age of 14, and I'm like, man, what are they gonna have going on? I'm just
Mm.
excited about it, right? Like, because like even all the like super new stuff, metaverse, everybody's talking about that, right? Crypto, all that. My kids are so young. I got a 4-year-old, soon be 5, 6, turning 7, 9, turning 10. They're like, all of this stuff will be old to them
Mhm.
when they get popping. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And I'm like, man, what are they gonna be
Yeah.
on, right? And I'm excited by it though. I'm like, I'm looking forward to it. You know
Well,
what I'm saying?
I think that's the key difference in attitude is people are either they look at the future and they say, "Oh my God, there's so much chaos," or "There's so much broken with it," or they look at the present and they say, "There's so much
Yeah,
broken with it, therefore the future is going to be broken." Take
yeah,
like climate change. It's like, well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff broken about the way that the Earth is right now, and then one attitude can be, "I'm not going to have kids. I'm not going to, this life."
yeah. Bring someone into this.
Yeah, I don't want to
Yeah,
bring someone into this. Or you just have an attitude of, hey, we can solve, humans have solved every problem we've run into. We can absolutely solve this. And I
totally.
wish there was more of that inspiration in the public
Well,
sphere.
those are the people that make all the money.
Yeah.
The people that believe we can solve the big problems and then have the audacity to go try, not even do it, just try.
Yeah.
That's where that's where greatness happens,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't happen in the doom and gloom and all of that crap, right? I remember this interview. It's a little old now. Peter Thiel, and they was he was talking about taking HGH, just as an everyday person, right? Not an athlete. He's just like all the benefits of HGH. And then they say, well, HGH has been known to kind of cause cancer. Are you concerned with that? And he looks the guy square in the face. Is like, cancer? He's like, oh, I fundamentally believe we'll have that solved in the next 10 years. I'm not worried about it. Right. And that meant now he's got access to all kind of data and
Mhm.
science and technology and the cooler, Peter Thiel's the founder, one of the founders of PayPal, and now, is chairman at Palantir and all that good stuff. So government stuff, he sees it all. And he was like, cancer, like, not worried about it. We'll solve it. I was like, and I, not to be insensitive to people that have lost people from cancer, I have, but that was amazing to me. I was just like, that's it.
Mm.
Like, we will solve the hardest, most complex challenges. I'm not worried about it. Now, there's a level of a point of recklessness, right? That you don't want to like.
Yeah.
But he wasn't. That wasn't where he wasn't coming from a reckless place. He was coming from a place of certainty and optimism, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why he's built several
Yeah.
multi-billion-dollar businesses around those
Yeah.
concepts of the future.
Yeah. Confidence too.
Yeah,
Confidence and it's a confidence in not him, right? He's not saying I'm going to solve it.
yeah,
But human beings are capable of doing amazing things if we're aligned and efficient. I think we have to be
yep,
pointed at the right thing, and then we have to be able to do that thing efficiently. We have
for
to,
sure.
it's like our minds are insanely powerful if we can
It's the
organize them.
most powerful thing. There's not a piece of technology smarter because we designed the technology, right? Like everybody talks about, even your point about the AI beating us in chess. Who built it?
Yeah, yeah,
We built it to beat us. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that's like, I don't know. People could just miss it. Yeah. So I'm a exponential optimist, man.
You ever hear the expression, "I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right"?
All day. I never heard that, but that resonates with me.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I think
Yeah.
one of the reasons I get so fired up, I mean, I can just feel it, how much more interested and engaged I am with this topic, is that it's like the foundation to everything that people do that we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're not building the AI, but the people that can go efficiently and say, "Hey, I'm going to pick up a job for 5 hours a week doing AI contracting," and then they get into it,
Yep.
and it's easy and quick, and they can efficiently do it. It's like it's almost. I mean, God, I have to be biased here, and you're definitely biased, but it's like the most important thing that we figure out is how people can efficiently do the things they want to do in exchange for money.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
it's like somehow figure out a way that we throw money in a pot and then intelligently give that money to people who need it and projects that need it.
Mhm.
And it's like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Well, and I think that, like I say, the gig economy definitely starts to is like I always talk about it, right? I feel like the gig economy is the gateway to the kind of promise of the fourth industrial revolution because you're still leveraging humans to do a lot of the services and the kind of incremental stuff. There's like technology, and then there's this person that's an intermediary for the thing happening, right? But you're even starting to see now, like, robot delivery and some of this other stuff. um Even the, which is way off, but the Teslas, I don't know if you saw the Tesla robot
yeah.
stuff. They're trying to, but I do believe that, like, there is this place of optimal efficiency where, again, people are living their best lives in their most perfect days, and currency isn't the issue,
Hmm.
right? Because the other thing is, when you see what's happening at the bottom of the kind of economic um, rung, it's bad, man. And I come from it. And so it's like money will mess up your mental. And
Mm.
so, how do we remove that friction so that we're getting optimal output, optimal productivity, but people are also in a great state, in a great vibe, and great
Mm.
energy. You know what I mean? And then, again, that this utopian kind of thing that I would keep referencing, I don't actually know that I believe we'll get there. I don't think we'll ever be perfect, but I think we can always be perfecting.
Yeah. One way I think of utopia is it's like what would what would chimpanzee? I listened to this biologist. He
Hmm.
both studies primates, so like large gorillas and chimpanzees, and then he goes into the lab for half the year and then looks at them from a biological perspective under microscope.
Mm,
And so he
mm,
said one thing, that if you give chimpanzees all the food, all the space, and all the women, what's the first thing they do? The first thing is they sit around and enjoy it, and then they start fighting. There has to
mm,
be tension, something that we're doing and
mhm.
fighting literally or figuratively about. And I think that
Yeah,
like if we were ever in a utopian state, the first thing we would do is just destroy it. We would just
yeah,
to have something to do.
yeah. What do they say? What's the sun without the rain, right? Like,
Yeah,
you take it all for granted. It doesn't.
yeah,
There's no oomph.
yeah, 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 totally.
So
What do you think?
that's what's up.
What do you think about the? I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your upbringing and anything you learned through that experience, and you could carry with you today to say, this is these are either messages. I don't know if it's as much. I mean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, whether it's things we need to practically change in the structure of society, or whether it's ideas that need to penetrate to certain to like ideas that need to get out there. Whether it's
Yeah,
ways you manage money, or thinking about money, or jobs, or um, yeah. I'll just throw that to you and see what you.
yeah. The most practical thing is, most people just need more money.
Mhm.
Like, we talk a lot about, like, financial literacy and governmental support and who should have what, and but I think a lot of people that don't have money, it's been structural and systemic, and it's on purpose, and it's been intentional. And it, the only way to kind of make up that gap is to be intentional and purposeful.
Mhm.
And so I think there's a bunch of challenges there. That's a super complex issue from a money perspective, but just more so in general, like, this concept of possible, this concept that, like, you know, if you kind of keep moving forward with the right mind frame, it's possible, whatever it might be.
Mm.
And when you look at the most extreme cases of, like, coming from nothing and having everything, like, that possibility should be more, it should be highly diffused through those communities that it comes from. Not that you have to become the extraordinary outcome, but that if that extraordinary outcome is possible, getting to some level of median,
Mhm.
right, is also
Mhm.
possible. And so, like, what does that look like, and how do you do that at scale, and how do you do that within communities and cultures? And I mean, again, very big problem. And I think
Mhm.
one of the best ways to do it is to highlight and then some people disagree with this, but highlighting massive successes to show that it's possible is a really good way to try to do that at scale. Now, it doesn't. It's a wide approach that doesn't really go deep, and so. But yeah, I think people just need to believe that they just. I always talk about if you give someone like a peek into what's possible,
Mm,
that'll spark their passion.
mm,
And so this concept of what's possible and possibilities is just something I think we need to do at scale.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially now with the internet and the
Yeah,
amount of transactions and economy that's happening on the internet, like,
yeah,
your local community, what's physically outside your door, it doesn't matter nearly as much as it did. Not to say there
yeah,
aren't the same challenges by a physical community compared to
for
others,
sure.
but it's like, man, it seems like we're in a place of high potential. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, no. Listen, outside is limited. The internet is infinite.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, what anything you guys are looking for in particular? You've raised some money in the past. I assume you're
Yeah.
not raising now, but anything you're, any last message or a thing you want to throw out there?
No, man, we're just super excited to help a lot of companies, pay a lot of contractors. Got some good stuff on the horizon. We're doing a lot of data, a lot of research, kind of building up that data trove and that research muscle. Getting ready to roll out our first kind of like real tangible consumer product, which
Mm,
is a debit card for uh, mostly for underbanked and non-banked gig workers, but not just, I would say. So that's coming out at the beginning of 2022, and so we're gearing up for that, hiring a bunch of people, having fun, man. But like I said, most importantly, just trying to help companies pay contractors.
Well, kudos to you, man. It's a simple idea on one level, but it's also super important. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me
yeah.
on
I
too.
really enjoyed our conversation. I really respect a lot of your viewpoints. So,
Appreciate it, man.
thanks a lot, Craig. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Peace.